Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is returning guest Mia Hughes. She's the co-host of Beyond Gender podcast with Stella O'Malley. She's also an author and writer who has extensively researched and exposed the ins and outs of the wackier parts of gender so-called medicine. In this conversation, we talk about her findings. It's always really interesting what she's come across. And we also talk about medical ethics and how they apply to gender and not to other things. Fascinating woman, just a wonderful pleasure to have on. You can find links to her work down there in the description. Without further ado, here is Mia Hughes.
Well, there you are. Hello.
Mamma Mia, here we go again.
Fourth time, huh?
Welcome to my podcast.
Pleasure to be here, as always.
How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
You have a better setup going on. You're iterating toward technological excellence.
You think it's a better setup? I'm not quite there yet, but I did move.
Oh.
I'm in a new house, and I haven't quite got there yet. There's a big blank empty wall behind me.
Yeah.
That
get fleshed out.
Well, my plan is I've already talked to Laura, Laura Becker, and she does these wonderful psychedelic soul paintings that you can commission. So we're going to talk it over in Albuquerque. Oh yeah. And then I can commission one. That's what's going on the wall.
In Albuquerque, I was looking at the bill, and the copy that I have, you're not on it.
I'm not? Oh, well, I am speaking.
James Lanahan.
I'm on Saturday afternoon, right before Lionel Shriver. Lionel Shriver is the last person on the Saturday, and I'm right before Lionel.
Okay. Maybe I have an earlier version of this. What's your talk called?
Good question. It was a while ago that I submitted it. It's something like the upstream battle. No, hang on. I really should have been better prepared for this.
No, I've been going through the playbill and introducing the topic of people's talks.
Okay, you want me to find it here? I should.
No, you don't have to. I don't know.
No, I'll find it. I'll find it. It's
you can make something up.
It's something about, it's the upstream battle, challenging the false belief causing medical harm or something like that. My point is, it's because I came across this wonderful parable that is common in the medical world, that people know in the medical world, and it's about how this man is walking along the side of a river, and he sees somebody going by, and he struggles to save the person, and then he sees another person and another, and he's getting exhausted trying to save as many people as possible, and then he realizes he needs to go upstream and find out what's causing all of these people to fall into the river. And so that's what I'm basing my talk on. Like all of the wonderful things that are happening for you in the US, all of the bills and everything, the actions being taken, they're all downstream measures. One change of government and the harm starts again, and the people are being harmed. So you've got to tackle the idea that's causing all the harm.
So that first idea, that radioactive isotope of gender ideology, what is it? Have you split that particular atom?
I think I have. So Ooh. I think the dangerous idea is that trans is natural and healthy. I think you can trace all the harm back to that, because when trans activism made trans natural and healthy, which is not true, obviously, wanting body parts chopped off, believing yourself to be something you are not, it's not natural and healthy. It is a mental illness. But when they reframed it, which is obviously WPATH's de-psychopathologization campaign, but when they reframed it as natural and healthy, they prevented people getting help. And that's where all the harm stems from. That's where I am now, anyway.
Well, let's think that through. How would egregious body modification be natural and healthy? How do you make that leap? There's got to be some magical thinking in there.
It's not the body modification that's natural and healthy. It's the identity. It's trans is like gay. That's what they did for the political movement. Yeah. They took gay rights. They took all of the successes of gay rights. They took, born this way and de-psychopathologization. They took it all and then they applied it to trans. But the two are obviously not the same at all. So it's not that they're saying extreme body modification is natural and healthy. They're saying having a mismatched gender soul is natural and healthy and something to celebrate. It just so happens to come with this terrible pain and suffering and distress. And that's where the extreme body modification comes in. And we just have to fund that and not ask any questions.
Okay. So you did the WPATH files a couple years ago. What has it been? A couple years? A year and a half?
No,
maybe?
It's been a year and a half. About last March.
So that was, or could have been, like a major rod thrown in the engine of trans ideology. What has been the effect of that? And if we can see, like, I don't know, I don't want to do that thing where you look at all the planes that come back and then you misread what's wrong with the plane. I don't remember what that's called, but it's a famous little picture. But maybe we can see what the effect that has had and see where the vulnerabilities lie, what can be challenged. And maybe that's why you haven't gave up on this project, gave up on this story, gave up on these talks, is because you haven't yet cracked the code, or you haven't cracked that which the code is creating.
Well, I'm constantly just thinking, I've been thinking about this for just years and years. So for me, it's just a natural progression of where my thought process goes. WPATH files, I mean, it was March 2024. I think by chance, we timed it really well in that Michael Schellenberger and I released the WPATH files early March. And sort of, I would say the impact of it was I don't want to overblow it or anything. We put a lot of effort into making it a story. I got a lot of grief from those on our side that it's all just the same information. We know all this. And that was a fair criticism in that, yes, we in our little bubble of Twitter, we know it all. But the point was take all of the information that we know and put it to a wider audience, introduce the world to WPATH. And I think to a certain extent, we succeeded. I think we got the story. I don't know how many articles that were written about it internationally, but an awful lot of stories in mainstream outlets were put out there. So we did bring the madness of WPATH to the world, because like a month after WPATH files, I was invited to speak at Dissident Dialogues in New York. And in the VIP section, people could pay VIP tickets and go into the VIP section and talk to the speakers. And the number of just normal people that I encountered, and I said, I'm talking about the WPATH files, and they said, what's WPATH? And of course, in our bubble of turf Twitter, that's crazy. Somebody doesn't know what WPATH is. That's insane. You can't imagine that. But most people don't know what WPATH is. So that was the point of WPATH files. And then a month later came the Cass report, and brilliantly, Hilary Cass took some good shots at WPATH. That was the most satisfying part for me. And then June 2024, you guys got Bo v. Marshall. You got the unsealed internal WPATH emails in the Alabama. It was the challenge to Alabama's ban on youth gender medicine, and the Attorney General had ordered discovery. Let's see how WPATH drew up standards of care 8. That's the smoking gun. It still amazes me that WPATH still exists after Boe v. Marshall, after all of those revelations that came out. The fact that there are still healthcare providers everywhere following WPATH standards of care, it's frustrating because it should have ended them. And I'm still convinced that it will end them. I just think these things take much longer than you imagine they should.
Yeah. What we covered in our last convo was about how there literally is kind of a musical chairs / house of cards with all these professional organizations, where WPATH points to the Pediatric Association points to somebody else, and then they point back to WPATH. And if you knock out one of those legs, you would assume that it makes, if it doesn't tumble, at least makes all these other professional organizations vulnerable to lawsuits, to, I don't know, ethics complaints.
I've been thinking constantly about that at the moment. There isn't really, it's difficult to look at past scandals, past legal actions, because there's never been a scandal like this one, in that the professional association at the heart of this scandal made it all up. They're just a bunch of deranged trans activists who made up their entire body of scientific literature and then presented it to the world as if it was evidence-based, medically necessary guidelines. You know, there's never been anything like this level of fraud and conspiracy. So how do you tackle that in a legal sense? And that's what I've been thinking about. Like, I do fear that malpractice lawsuits, I know that many detransitioners who want to bring lawsuits just get told they don't have a malpractice case because their healthcare provider was following the standards of care for their field. And that's true. If a healthcare provider is following the accepted standards of care, they're not guilty of malpractice, even though they're causing terrible harm, because the standards of care are completely insane and based on no evidence whatsoever. So I just think, why not cut that out? Why not cut out the middleman? And what avenue do we have to bring legal action against WPATH for the fraud and conspiracy? I know the American Academy of Pediatrics is named in a lawsuit for civil conspiracy and fraud. So I would hope that you could do the same to WPATH.
I wonder how you would go about suing something like WPATH. I wonder how it's formed, because it's not a corporation. It's just a voluntary body that produces these papers. But because these papers have real world results, somebody has to be accountable. I wonder if like anybody in any of these organizations is accountable at all, even, plastic surgery, non-gender related plastic surgery, standards of care. If any of those people are if treatment comes down the pipe that is harmful, carcinogenic, long-term destruction of the body, do these people who in that one point in time agreed that it would probably be a good thing, are they accountable, or are they insulated by, not good Samaritan laws, but, reasonable doubt laws? They're not necessarily being malicious. I don't know. Well,
that's where we have to get creative, I think, and that's where I've not figured it out yet. I certainly don't have the knowledge of the legal system in order to do that, but we have to get creative simply because there hasn't been anything like this in the past. I mean, they've sued pharmaceutical companies for fraudulently presenting their drugs as safe when they weren't. Why can't you sue WPATH? Why can't somebody go after WPATH for fraudulently presenting their guidelines as evidence-based and therefore causing harm?
Well, could they not just plea insanity because they had the wrong idea? Like if the organization itself is so thoroughly detached from reality, could they make a case that, well, it was your fault for following the crazy person around? You know, they're the crazy ones. You should have known. And then they can kick it back to one of these more saner orgs. I don't know. This is all speculation.
Well, I mean, I often use the phrase "the lunatics running the asylum." That's where we've been for decades now. We have literally let the lunatics at WPATH run the whole show. Mm-hmm. So it is. I mean, we have to accept some responsibility ourselves as a society that we let these insane people set the guidelines for an entire field of medicine in which innocent young people surrendered body parts, their fertility, their sexual function, their health. We let that happen. So, I don't know.
Part of your work is to diagnose or to expose just how insane these people are. In relating this story since the WPATH files and prior to that, what have you found it's the details that are hardest for people to really believe? Or grok even?
It's simply how completely insane the conspiracy is. I think it's impossible for the average person who has not spent years and years researching and reading and understanding this. It's almost impossible to grasp the fact that there's nothing to gender medicine. Like there's no, I'm not just talking pediatric gender medicine, I'm talking the entire field of gender medicine. There's no science there. There's no evidence that this is beneficial. There's no evidence that this actually helps people. There's a lot of activist bluster. There's a lot of like shouting statistics like less than 1% regret rate and all of the rest of it, and everybody's happy and it's life-saving and it's medically necessary. But there's no actual evidence to support any of it. It's all fabricated. And it has been since, if you point the beginning to the 1960s with John Money and those guys, they were just swept up in the sexual revolution and the cultural moment, and they believed that this was the right thing to do for these men. But they didn't have any evidence. Since 1960 onwards, nobody's produced any evidence. It's just a whole bunch of people saying this is the right thing to do. Now, there's no other field of medicine like that. And then you throw in the unbelievable fraud of WPATH, the fact that this group is a trans activist group fabricating evidence and standards of care and just making stuff up. They've got a eunuch chapter, non-binary surgeries, all the rest of it. The very fact that then the entire medical world fell for WPATH, fell for the stunt that they pulled, and that all over the world gender clinics are following these guys, it's too conspiratorial. You sound too insane. I know how insane I sound when I try and explain it to Canadians, because I'm always looking at Canada. Canada's so innocent. They have no idea. So, well, I mean, in a stupid kind of naive way, I don't think, not innocent in that no harm has been done.
Deer in the factory farm headlights kind of thing.
Exactly. Canadians don't understand this. They really genuinely, for the most part, think that this is medicine. They think that there's evidence. They think that the science is settled. They think that this is the right thing, the right way to treat people, to treat young people, but adults as well. And I know how completely mad I sound when I try and explain to them that there's nothing there. There's nothing there at all. And so that's the biggest problem. I think it's, is it Peter Boghossian that says it? Like if trans were just a little less crazy, people would believe it. It's just because it's too crazy to believe. And especially the medical
uncanny
side.
Valley-esque spot dip in conspiracy thinking. Conspiracy is hard too, because it's hard to articulate what a conspiracy theory actually is, because you can over-determine the intention behind it. It can be purely environmental. You can have a bunch of different people with a bunch of different intentions, but you don't have to have like this overarching dark lord strategy going on. You can just have this confluence of activism and then the context of historical activism, the context of progressives always needing a new cause, and then it just all clicks into place. In your darker moments, are you immune from thinking that this is a orchestrated, top-down, dark, shadowy, weffy, schwabby kind of psyop?
I don't think I go. I definitely. I think it's top down in a certain sense. I don't go for the great grand conspiracy that it's all. I don't know. When I tweet stuff, I get all kinds of people telling me trans is just a tiny drop in this whole grand plan and stuff. I'm not. On the if I stick to my area of expertise, if I stick to gender, I can't help but go into the conspiracy. I don't believe it's all one. Money. Well, I mean, I don't even. I get grief for this, but I honestly don't place that much emphasis on the following the money side of it. Perhaps it's because it just doesn't really interest me, so I've never dug into it, and therefore it's not slotting into place. I'm far more. Like, definitely transactivism, absolutely for sure, created a new reality and then forced everyone to live in it. That sounds so conspiratorial, and it was. They conspired to create a new reality and then they forced us all to live in it. And so when I say that, of course I sound completely insane. And how could the average person understand that? And yet it is true, and you only have to look around the world to see that you're living in that mad reality. But I agree that there are so many cultural threads that all converged, and I don't even think malicious intent. I don't put malicious intent onto any of these different threads. I don't think John Money and Harry Benjamin really had evil intent. I don't think the Dutch, when they launched the puberty suppression experiment, had evil intent. I don't even think trans activists, when they decided one day that they were going to create this new reality in which men were women and kids could be born in the wrong body, I don't think they had ill intent. But I do think that when all of the threads converge, something very evil occurred.
Well, we're on the cusp of this thing called transhumanism, and gender is the first salvo. I mean, for whatever reason, people really believe in transgenderism, so a lot of money and lives are being fed into it to make it work. A lot of careers, even a lot of money, a lot of media to make it work. So it's kind of a dry run experiment on how far detached from reality human beings can get, especially insulated by technology, media, and fairy tale, and the internet, the virtual reality. So I wonder if there is a way to tie this transhumanist inevitability, perhaps, closer to reality, if gender just was using all the tools of transhumanism, or if transhumanism itself is doomed to some sort of Luciferian fall from grace.
Oh, you think trans could bring down transhumanism? I don't think it could. Is that what you mean?
I'm wondering. So, because transgender is kind of a subset of transhuman. So I'm wondering if it's a failed experiment, if transhumanism is going to try all these different things, because we're talking about redesigning embryos, tying little machines to sperm. I mean, like, we are going to, and we already kind of are half GMO at this point, with our food and eugenics on one level or another, but technology is embedding itself into our fertility. Transhumanism or transgenderism actually messes around with that by sterilizing it mostly. But all the reproductive transhumanist tech that is aimed towards regeneration could be just as false, but is a little bit closer to reality so that it can perpetuate. I don't know. Man-made horrors beyond our comprehension kind of stuff.
I don't know if I'm allowed to. I think there's a rule where you can't disclose what you discussed at this conference, so I won't say where I was, but I was at this event, and there were a whole bunch of people there who are in this business. They're in the business of improving
Super
embryos.
babies.
And
yeah.
And I just, it concerns me just instinctively. You think, oh, that really does not sound like a good idea. But many of the people there were just like, why not? If we have the ability to improve, to eradicate certain, birth defects and disabilities and improve, it's kind of like eugenics. Well, it's eugenics really, isn't it? But
is.
with technology.
Yeah.
Why not? And I struggle to articulate why not. It's only in a kind of moral and instinctive. It just
intuitive.
Sounds like a really bad idea. It sounds like it could go wrong, horribly wrong in the future in ways that we can't predict. And that's my only objection to it. But then I think we're going to bring down gender. I can't help but think that. I think that transactivism, it's excessive aggression and demands has destroyed the gender movement, and we're just cleaning up the mess. I think it's technically over for them. I don't think it's going to bring down transhumanism. I think they're not the same thing. They may coexist, they may cross paths, but they're not the same thing.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if, when we go back to that first principle argument that you're making, I wonder if it does rely on a moral intuition of right and wrong, of real and unreal, of good and bad, etc. If it's strong enough to take down or question gender ideology, then is it also strong enough to forestall reproductive technology? Have you investigated your own upstream moral intuition on this? Like, why does gender, as just a instance of moral, not outrage, but revulsion or disgust? I guess there's got to be a more neutral term, but your moral intuition say this gender stuff is wrong, essentially wrong.
Well, it's false. First of all, it's just not. There's no truth to it. A man. It's not healthy. Back to this whole it's natural and healthy. Of course it's not. It's not healthy to believe yourself to be a member of the opposite sex and to want your penis chopped off. It's just not healthy, and it's stupid and absurd to even suggest that it is. And so therefore, it's not that I'm morally repulsed by it or anything like that. It's just... It's not true. There's no grounding in reality, and you're selling people a lie. If you're telling a man that his life will be better if he has his penis chopped off, or if you're telling a woman that her life will be better if she has a breast cut off and an arm flesh appendage sewn onto her groin, you're lying to that person, and you're actually not making their life better. I'm not convinced. I will say, like I've said this before, that Peter Boghossian asked me, what would it take to change my mind? Show me the evidence. Show me like actual real evidence that these men who've had their penises chopped off are actually happy and thriving, and that everyone's living these wonderful, enriched lives. Show me the evidence that the women with the arm flesh appendages sewn onto their groin, they're thriving and well and living great lives. If you can show me the evidence, I'll change my mind. It's just... no one's ever produced that evidence. They just say, well, I mean, what have we got? No one does any follow-up. The only long-term follow-up you have in the field of gender medicine shows the men have like 19 times higher suicide rate than the average the general population, and the women have, I think, 40 times higher suicide rate. That's your longest follow-up study. So that's not convincing me. You're not convincing me that you've made anyone's life better when you've got these outrageously high suicide rates. So until I see the evidence, I'm just going to say that, first of all, it's not medicine because it's not helping. But also, I will, even if you can show me the evidence that these people are thriving, it's still not true. It's still not natural, healthy, innate variation of human existence.
Yeah.
And... it's still, they are not men are not women and women are not men, and you can't medically change someone's sex. So I'm more opposed to just the absurdity of it.
I wonder why, in the beginning of gender medicine, let's just say the hormone aspect of it, why there wasn't a control. If we're going to experiment, especially on pubescent teens, with this gender medicine, this hormone replacement therapy, why not have put one group of boys on the testosterone suppression plus the estrogen, and the other set of boys on testosterone, and then see if their gender distress or dysphoria abates by pushing them further towards the female or further towards the male. Have you run across even somebody voicing the idea, even in gay conversion therapy, let's just give the boys more testosterone and see if their sissy boyness dissolves on contact with the man drug?
Oh, you mean don't let them go through natural puberty with their natural testosterone surge? You mean why didn't they pump them full of testosterone?
Yeah, well, if we're going to pump them full of the opposite, why not have a control group? Well, and it wouldn't be a control group. There'd be a third group that you don't do anything to. One group that you give cross-sex hormones, and one group you give true sex hormones to.
Yeah, I had never even considered that as the third option. I always thought about the do nothing and give them the drugs. I never thought of that.
But if we're going to give them drugs, why has nobody thought, like, maybe it's a lack of testosterone that's causing this cross-sex identification?
I mean, it was too late in the day for that, I suppose. Like, by the time they come up with this idea, I think they'd moved away from, if you're talking like giving gay men testosterone to try and cure them of their homosexuality. Was that a real thing? They really did do that, right?
Did they?
I think they did. Well, I know that they actually, like,
I think they probably did.
Who was the guy? Was it Steinach way back in the early days who tried implanting testicles from heterosexual men into homosexual men to try and cure them of their homosexuality?
Wait, so they'd have like 4 balls, or
I think they may be removed. I think it replaced, more of a replacement. Take out one and put in. That was in the earliest days of this whole experiment. So
because this is the mad scientist shit that I have you on my show to cover. So somebody did go down that route and they went around, found some dead soldier out there with a huge body count in the proper way that a man should have a body count, like dead enemies, and then take his testes and throw it in the sissy boy.
I'll be honest, I don't know where they got the heterosexual testicles from. I'm not sure where they found them, but I do know he implanted them, and it didn't work, I should say. It didn't
work, or did it take? I mean, some bad things could happen.
I don't think there was any change in sexual orientation. There was no change there. I'm not really sure what health outcome there was. Probably wasn't great, was it?
Yeah. Well, with just running through my crazy idea, which I'm glad they haven't done, but they still did the other thing. So why didn't they just do both? But you see a lot with the AGP set, or the autogynephiles, they are already rather hyper-masculine. Their sexuality... There's a theory called erotic target inversion, where they're just as male, but that target of their desire is kind of ricochets off of a woman and bounces back to them. But it's still very testosterone, very sexual, very pornographic in some of its manifestations. The homosexual transsexual, however, it would basically be another form of gay conversion therapy, just like transition is. It's a form of gay conversion therapy. You just convert them rather not into a heterosexual male, but just into a heterosexual female. In the HSTS, homosexual transsexual therapy.
Yeah, I suppose that's what they actually think they're doing. I won't imply malicious intent in that I don't think they set out to create a new kind of conversion therapy. No. I just think in their misguided compassion, accidentally created a new kind of conversion therapy, which is arguably far worse than the original. Well, the original conversion therapy wasn't great, of course, but this one is really, there's no going back. I mean, once you've done the puberty blockers, the estrogen, the chopping off the penis, there's really no going back from that. So there's no recovery from that. And I think many of these kids, they don't even develop their homosexual identity, the homosexual orientation, because they never have a chance to grow into their sexual identities. They don't mature sexually.
Yeah, Jazz Jennings being the patient zero of that. Well,
that
probably
was
not patient zero, but
broadcast.
Yes.
To millions of people. That's the twisted part of it, isn't it? Is that it's not just that this happened. It's not just that they accidentally created the new conversion therapy, but they filmed the entire experiment. They filmed it, they broadcast it to millions of people. And there wasn't rioting in the streets. There weren't people out in the streets demanding that this crime be abolished, demanding that it end. Instead, people took to the streets in celebration and marched demanding that it continue. It's very dark.
Yeah, it's dark, and it speaks to the modern Western imagination being coaxed into a space where, through reality TV and through various forms of entertainment, being coaxed into a space where it's oddly circus-like. The circus kind of went through this different iteration. In the 90s, you have this, the Springers and those daytime crazy talk shows where it's kind of, we're looking at the circus, we're watching the circus, but then it becomes normalized, and not just normalized, but it becomes a vector of compassion. And then it becomes politicized, where the freaks are actually, in certain respects, certain other freaks are still castigated and cast out, but certain freaks are put on a pedestal and worshipped. And it's kind of Romanesque in a way, where you can see the Romans getting further and further into their bread and circuses, and violence begets violence. And then all of a sudden they start creating, out of these orgies, these hermaphroditic gods and goddesses start to populate the twisted imagination, because that's just the way that this hunger, this entertainment drive develops on itself.
So you think Jerry Springer laid the groundwork for trans rights?
I think having that feed into your imagination, I think the corruption of the imagination, like the depurification of the imagination, you indulge in the darkness, and then the darkness just kind of takes a place in there, and then it says, you can't really judge me. Why would you judge me? That's mean to judge.
Yeah, interesting. I always look at it as gay rights laid the groundwork. I've never looked at it with Jerry Springer. And
well, I was thinking that I've heard that a lot, but with the Jazz Jennings specifically, that became a phenomenon and didn't cause backlash because it comes from reality TV, which traces back to, which probably was heavily influenced by the Jerry Springers, the Ricky Lakes.
I think they did it skillfully. I think it didn't ignite the outrage and the fury that it should have, simply because of how skillfully they sanitized it. As well, there's something about this so-called trans child, don't you find, that like the little boy, you put him in he's going to start off as being an extremely effeminate little boy, an extremely gender non-conforming little boy. And then so you put him in the dress and he just looks like a girl. And it's so easy then to manipulate people with the soft music and the stories of suffering, and the little boy is happy, and you show this little boy prancing around in his princess gown, and he is happy and he does look happy. And if you just don't, I think nobody looked to the future. Nobody in the puberty suppression experiment did. Nobody when they created the concept of the trans child did. But nobody in I Am Jazz and that whole filming, I don't believe anyone was thinking beyond the moment. It's all about making these these kids happy in the moment. Even in WPATH files, there's that endocrinologist who literally says that. He's like, yeah, it's really difficult, he's talking to a blank wall when you offer them fertility preservation, and they haven't had high school biology and they don't understand any of it, but we just want them to be happy now. And that's what it's all about. And so in I Am Jazz, you can kind of see why people, because nobody looked to the future, they just fell for it. We all just went along with it. But now we're in the future, and we've got all of the detransitioners, and we've got all of the regret, and we've got the consequences that nobody dared face while the experiment was underway. And it's just tragic. It's an absolute tragedy.
When people brought up the consequences or the potential harms, they were vilified and shut down.
Yeah, and we have transactivism to thank for that, of course. Yeah. And there's your conspiracy as well. You sound conspiratorial, but it's true that transactivism is to blame for this, in that they viciously destroyed anyone who suggested that this might not be a good idea. Now, I try and not apply evil motives to most people, but transactivism as a movement, there can be no forgiveness for that they actively shut down the people who were trying to say this could be really bad, this is a really bad idea, we need to look out. They shut down anyone who tried to protect children, and for that
millstones.
Absolutely, that they really, there's no forgiveness.
One of the many sins and evils, there's plenty of irony to gender medicine. I'm wondering if you can highlight some of the ironies. Specifically, they go out of their way to deny sex while reaffirming gender. But because they're operating on males and females, everything that they do has to be very sexed. So do they get tongue-tied when they're talking about a trans man or a trans woman? I know they got all this language and stuff, but when they're talking about all the effects that all of this intervention has on a male versus a female, they're two different. There's got to be the science itself, or the medicine itself, not the science, but the medicine itself is pulling them in two directions. One column for females, one column for males. And if they run into weird ideological, cognitive dissonance.
I don't know how they survive, to be honest. I mean, you can boil it down to quite simply, they are endlessly saying sex and gender are different, and yet gender affirming care targets the sex characteristics. So they know full well that they're the same thing. They know that they're not doing gender reassignment, they're doing sex changes, which is why people object to the term sex changes. But I like it because it's blunt and to the point, and it shows what they are attempting to do. Of course, it's impossible, but at least it's clear that that's what they're attempting to do. And then the literature is baffling. It gets so muddled because you can be reading literature about a transgender female, and then you realize it's a man and he's male. And it's like, what am I even reading? There's no consistency. There's no logic to it whatsoever. And it's all simply because they created this whole, they created something that doesn't exist, gender identity. And they then based an entire field of medicine on something that doesn't exist. If they would just use the language of sex changes, if we could just go back to transsexualism, you're trying to change the sex of these people, all of the confusion would disappear. And then I think for, even not sex reassignment, gender reassignment, they didn't like that, and they changed it to gender confirmation. So it's like we're just confirming the gender of it's all language games, and it's all stupid. None of it makes any sense. So I really like the language of sex. Of course, the problem is sex has two meanings, and I understand why it gets very confusing, and some people have a problem with it, but they're not doing anything to your gender. They're not, it's all targeting the sex characteristics.
Have they tried to measure gender? Have they found it yet?
The gender essence residing within us, or what?
Yeah.
Oh, they haven't found it. There's that great quote. It's Robert Stoller, I think, to John Money or Harry Benjamin or someone, and he says, "Don't despair that we haven't found the biological marker of gender identity yet. I'm sure it's there somewhere." And he said that in like 1965 or something, and we still haven't found it. Because it doesn't exist, just like we still haven't found a way to measure the color of a person's aura. It doesn't exist. So there's gender. I'm not a blank slater in that. We've had this conversation before, I remember, because there was a spectrum of collars. If I remember correctly, I was wearing a frilly collar. Like masculinity and femininity, of course, there's a broad range of ways to express yourself, and some people are more masculine, some are more feminine. That is not up for debate as far as I'm concerned, but that's not what they're targeting. They're not medicalizing a person's gender expression. They're targeting the sex characteristics. So they need to be clear that that's what they're doing and get rid of all this talk of gender.
Yeah, but they can't help themselves. They're looking for a godlike essence. So either they give up on the godlike essence or they start to create a theology, and they start to try to maybe bring in some theologians. How do you create a religion to make it consistent and I guess wholesome wouldn't be the right word, but you would assume that they want some outcomes. Like, if you believe in this thing, it will work for you, and here's how the whole thing works, and here's how and here's how you're baptized or whatever. But it seems like because they can't just admit that it's a religion or it's a belief system, it's a faith, because they can't say that that's what it is, because everything would fall apart if they did that, or it would be a lot of problems to convince everybody if they just come out with that. Then they can't actually do the work. So they have to do all these patchwork runarounds, and then they start throwing more and more things in there, like the eunuch and the non-binary, because there's no limiting principle.
Exactly that. There is no limit because it's not grounded in reality. But people get upset, with this whole eunuch and everything. Why not? You've got like men with female gender identities, women with male gender identities, people with both sex identities, non-binary, but they're both and they want two sets of genitals. But really, why not? Why not have eunuch identities? The sky is the limit when you're not grounded in reality. You can do whatever you want. And then we have this, I don't know if I talked about this last time, that guy in Ontario who wanted his colon vagina. He wanted his colon vagina because he's non-binary with a female dominant spirit or something like that. And so he wanted Ontario to pay for, he wanted to keep his penis. Normally they invert the penis, they use the penile tissue. He wanted to keep his penis and get a vagina made out of his colon, because then he would have both sets of genitals to reflect his non-binary identity. Yeah. And Ontario said, no way, we're not paying for that. And then he appealed, and then it went back and forth. And ultimately, they ruled in his favor that the Ontario taxpayer has to pay for this man to get his colon vagina made in Curtis Crane's clinic in Texas. Curtis Crane is one of the biggest, most notorious charlatans out there. But at the same time, when I was reading it, it's obviously stupid and outrageous, but why not? Why not have a colon vagina and keep your penis? Why not? If you're going to chop people's penises off, turn them into like cavity wounds that they have to dilate for the rest of their life, if you're going to give puberty blocked boys who their penis didn't develop because you blocked their puberty with these experimental drugs, if you're going to give them colon vaginas because they think that they're women, why not give this non-binary guy a colon vagina as well? It's just, there's no medical ethics to any of it. None
Who
of
needs
it's
two
medicine.
buttholes, though? It doesn't even go anywhere, but whatever. The sky's the limit.
Well, I mean, he's male and female, Benjamin. So he needs a penis
yeah.
and a vagina.
But it's a butthole. It's just a second butthole.
Well,
that's all it is. It's made out of butts.
Yeah, I mean, but if there's no medical ethics, if you do not have any, if you are not guided by anything that resembles traditional Hippocratic medical ethics, sure, like, go ahead.
Is there a third boob brigade in the WPATH Bowers? You know, women who want a third breast, or men who want their wives to have a third breast?
I haven't come across that, but I don't know what it was. I don't know what YouTube video it was. I did an interview and I remember reading the comments, and there was someone in the comments who was deadly serious, said that they knew of a person who had just one breast, a non-binary woman who
those old performers who would be male and then female if you turn side to side.
I mean, I don't know if that's true, but again, why not? Just why not? There's literally no limit. I know in WPATH Files there was the guy, Thomas Satterwhite, who's renowned for doing all of these bigenital and nullification surgeries, and he'll do things like customized mastectomy scars. There's a lot going on.
Like do
there.
An emoji or something?
I wonder what I did once look. I do advise viewers now, like, I have this impulse, we all have it, right, where someone says, don't look at this, so you have to go and have a look. So of course people said to me, don't look at the images, the photograph gallery on Satterwhite's gender clinic website. So I went and had a look, but I strongly advise that you do not go. No,
it was a bad decision.
It was a really bad decision. You cannot erase those images from your mind, but I didn't see any customized mastectomy scars.
No, okay. But that's disappointing.
It's just extreme body modification. And if that's all you're doing, really, like, why not sew on a third arm, you know?
I mean, I would like another pinky. You'd type faster.
There you go. You see?
How is this morbid fascination with this topic? How has it changed, if it changed at all, or informed you more about just run-of-the-mill plastic surgery for female enhancement, male enhancement? Has it changed your thoughts on that?
Not really. I mean, I've never thought plastic surgery was a good idea. I've never understood it. I've never felt the desire for it. I think there's value to it in certain medical conditions, or if you injuries, reconstruction. But as for, you'll see the women with the just enormous breasts and the big lips and stuff. And I think even plastic surgeons surely should have a code of ethics. And I thought they did, to be honest. And when you see these extreme examples, it makes me think, goodness me, they mustn't. But I just think most of the people going to these extremes have probably some form of body dysmorphia, and that treating it surgically is not the solution, in the same way that having the mental disorder of gender dysphoria, what we're calling now, treating that surgically is not the solution either. So I've never been a fan of plastic surgery. Even as I age, I'm 47, and I definitely probably could benefit from having some, but I've never felt the desire, even for the wrinkles, anything. I do dye my hair, so maybe I'm being a little hypocritical here. I do cover up the gray and try and look a bit younger, but.
Well, when you think about it that way, and a lot of the arguments for trans people, it comes down to obscuring the degrees of extremes, right? If you put makeup on, you're a trans woman. You probably have, if you spend more than 10 minutes in front of the mirror in the morning, you're probably experiencing some level of autogynephilia, where you love being a woman. You love yourself as a woman.
Oh,
so
goodness.
so there's just these gradations. And if we split sex into XY and XX, then what about the XXYs, you know? And then that's where you get into this argument by the marginalization and this obscuring of spectrums, right? This where it kind of takes out the ability to really nail down these categories, because the categories of themselves are hazy to begin with. I'm sure that there's probably a logical fallacy around that. But
I wasn't expecting to discover that I'm actually an autogynephilic man, but
me and my wife Leslie, we've had discussions or arguments around Kim Kardashian being autogynephile. You know, like these Madonna too, like these women who get on this obsession with hyper feminizing themselves. It's a form of autogynephilia. And maybe it's not erotically driven, maybe it's for an audience, but they're still participating in this hyper feminization.
Yeah, hyperfeminization. I don't know that that's autogynephilia, though. They're not. Are they? I mean, are they sexually attracted to themselves in this hyper-feminine form? That would be, then they're autogynephilic, I suppose.
Yeah, see, this is where the argument gets into the details where you start have to playing a little bit of word games, but it doesn't really matter to a certain respect if your love is people loving you as a woman. It's love of yourself by way of other people. It's more of a female typical mythological, like mirror on the wall kind of autogynephilia. So it doesn't have the same erotic properties as a male autogynephile, but I still do think it's processed through a vanity. And I think vanity is really one of the sins of this entire issue.
Yeah, but I think with autogynephilia, you can't downplay how all-consuming the erotic fixation is. Mm-hmm. If you're saying that Madonna, I mean, yeah, that to me is body dysmorphic disorder. That is someone somewhere along the way had to intervene and give that woman mental health support so that she didn't keep on going down this plastic surgery path. But I think to say that that's autogynephilia is to not understand the really all-consuming, overpowering erotic drive that sends these men down this insane medical path. And to me, I just interviewed Ray Blanchard, and we didn't get it, and it was a great conversation, but we didn't get into it as much as I wanted to. He's wonderful in interviews. It's my first time interviewing him, but my question to him was, like, is there not a way to help these men manage that all-consuming, overpowering drive that sends them to want to have the penis chopped off? Because there's the medical route that just seems to be accepted by everyone as this is the only way. If you don't do this, then they'll top themselves or whatever. And I think there's a gap in the research surely there's a way to help these men manage it. But then this is something I was reading just the other day, a paper from 1966 on transsexualism. And the guy made a really insightful observation that he thought it was an iatrogenic condition, in that he had noticed that the men showing up at his clinic, they all told him that the burning, overpowering desire for this surgery to embody the female body came after they learnt that the surgery was possible, which this will be the post-Jurgensen days. Like, he came out in the 50s and he triggered a mini wave of these men. But it's knowing that it's possible that sends the man into overdrive to absolutely completely fixate on getting the surgery and having his penis turned into a vagina. So in that sense, it's iatrogenically created as soon as you make it available. And that's the problem. I think we dug ourselves into this place where, because it's so widely available and it's supposed to be life-saving and medically necessary and it's ethical and sound, how do you yank that away from the autogynephilic men and say, oh, here, why don't you try I know it's probably not correct, it's not politically correct to say it, but wouldn't even some form of something to reduce the sex drive because it's erotically motivated, wouldn't that be more compassionate than chopping his penis off? Mm-hmm. But apparently that's not an acceptable option.
God bless the sexologists. They are a kooky bunch and they have some fascinating research and fascinating ideas. But one thing that you actually have to get over, which is just really fascinating in interviewing Blanchard, Bailey, James Cantor, and a lot of the sexologists. Deborah So's an interesting kind of case study because she was in the sexology mindset, which they just don't have any sex ethics, or ethics do not intrude on the research. And because it's sex of all things, it's really hard to suppress an ethical reaction to that. And if you look at the Kinsey research, where there's, I don't know exactly, but every once in a while in turf circles, they'll get into the perversity of Kinsey and how he might have masturbated young boys or something like that, right? There was some sort of pedophilic aspect to it. But in the research mindedness, sex just becomes purely a biological function. And it's really interesting that and that's part and parcel of the sexual revolution, once we took the ethics off of sex, it's Pandora's box. The limitless energy and imagination that human beings have for the erotic necessitates, in order for the survival or the flourishing of civilization to be kept under wraps. But we took that off, and this is downstream of that. And you see it in the sexologist.
It's not a subject that most people can look at from a cold, scientific, analytic perspective. And that is what makes sexologists incomprehensible to most of us, isn't it? Like, just that they can look at this.
Yeah.
Pedophilia is the one. Like,
yes.
If you can study pedophilia from a cold clinical perspective, that's very disturbing to the normal person. Like, we look at the research into pedophilia and it's just horrifying. This is just unethical and an abomination. But they're looking at it in a very different way that I can't even put myself into that mindset to even understand what they're doing. But yeah, it's not a subject. I don't know. Do we need sexology? I mean, did we need to study it? Did we need to focus on it? Again, the iatrogenic nature, I suppose, like perhaps we're creating transsexuals by studying it and having words for it. And then the idea spreads around. But the same thing for bizarre sexual proclivities, just by studying and talking about it, perhaps you're spreading it. Of course, I love the whole people wanting their legs chopped off. I just finished another essay on that.
What are they called? That's
apotemnophilia, apotemnophilic people, apotemnophilia, love of amputation. And, I'm convinced that we could start an epidemic of that, just given the right cultural climate. If we, celebrated people who elected to have healthy legs chopped off, and we could create a contagion of people wanting their healthy legs chopped off. But take any bizarre sexual desire and thrust it out into the mainstream, normalize it. Sure, you can make it spread. There are things that we just don't need to be exposed to, I think.
Well, that goes down to one of the justifications for research into pedophilia is proper judgment of people who are either convicted or potential pedophiles. And so if you can quantify that, then you can mete out justice. You can be fair to these people. So if you don't want to do massive incarceration, or let's just say the wood chipper, then, or even deciding between the wood chipper and the incarceration, you're already taking a step away from like that reflexive judgment. Then you start to ask these really nitty gritty questions about what do we want in our gene pool? Like what is modern Western society? Are we so compassionate that we can isolate these different things that traditionally were just, there's no question about it. You do this. If you think about you shouldn't even say it because we will destroy you. And if you do it, you will be destroyed. So it's kind of like there's something in our justice system, our desire for fairness that is gamed by this stuff. It's really interesting.
It is. Yeah. I mean, the wood chipper, we all have that because we all have that natural impulse to protect children. Well, we should. Actually, a lot of people no longer seem to have the natural impulse to protect innocent children. So the wood chipper just, it's an instinctive response. I don't know. I mean, it seems, again, back to, pedophile map, what is it? Minor attracted person acceptance. It's just a disaster. It's got disaster written all over it. And it's got, you're abandoning child safeguarding in order to be compassionate. And for me, I put children first, the safety and innocence of children first in everything.
Yeah. Which it's just, that's where it gets dicey. And that's where there's the possibility of a eugenic, more right-wing coded stance on all types of non-divergent sexuality, where the snapping back to there's one proper way for sexuality to manifest is within this context. And we can allow some deviation, but it has to be completely silenced. And we're going to prop up this one way. But when you see, and this is the slippery slope, I don't know how much of it's a fallacy, how much of it's not a fallacy, but the pride parade going from gay and lesbian rights to let your freak flag fly, it's very dysgenic. And then you get more and more crip, and all these different like downstream things. Like once you deviate, it seems like once you deviate a little bit from the straight and narrow, everything, you have less and less defenses for things that are further and further from the norm. And we can't even say it's the norm because we're 90s liberals. So like we went to gay rights, that's the norm. Born this way, that's the norm. And then we're less inclined to be judgmental for further and further.
Gay rights definitely primed us, but I don't know why there had to be, I don't even know that I buy the slippery slope, but I don't think trans is the natural progression from gay. I think that was, and here's my tinfoil hat, that was planned and top down. But I don't think that there needs to be a slippery slope from accepting same-sex marriage or homosexuality to accepting pedophiles and bestiality or whatever. I don't think there has to be a slippery slope because in homosexuality, there's no harm. I have a really hard time. You'd have a really hard time convincing me that there's harm between in two consenting adults being together. Whereas,
okay, what about 3 consenting adults then? If we just stay within marriage, what about polyamory, polygamy?
Oh, poly is interesting. I think there's harm. I think if you introduce that in a marital setting where there are children, there's going to be harm, or that from the point of view of the child, it's more unstable and confusing. And I don't think it's good for a marital situation if there are children involved. Polyamorous relationships, I interviewed Diana Fleischman, and she sells it well. She doesn't make it sound like, I had something of a revulsion towards it, but that's, I suppose, the exposure that I've had seeing certain polyamorous, polycule. I don't know.
Yeah.
Diana sells it well. She makes it sound like something that can work if everybody involved is the right disposition, the right type of person. Then
it's a high IQ, probably high, not high class, but higher class in the socioeconomic sense. can work more. That's where you see it popping up a lot in New York City, but it's usually one guy with a bunch of broads, but that on the societal level, that destabilizes, that dries up the dating market for lower status males. High status male men get all the women, and then you get more and more resentment over time in polygynous societies. Yeah, many women to one man, polygyny.
Do you see it catching on, though? I don't really see it catching on. It's more people, a certain fringe, a small number of people on the fringe might be suited to that. And then there's a contagion. It's a kind of trend on the left, I would think. And those on that side, Diana was telling me, like, she's been a part of like just groups, not relationships, but just the poly groups, and there's chaos, and there are people in there because they're attracted to that way of life, but they're not emotionally suited to it. So I don't see it catching on.
So I guess this is the interesting tension here. And I don't have answers. And I know that even asking the questions puts me outside of the liberal progressive mindset, or the acceptance. Consenting adults is kind of the standard line drawn in the sand. Consenting adults should be able to do anything that they want. And the privacy, whatever happens in your own bedroom. That is very similar. It sounds very similar to that Jazz Jennings. We're just thinking about the now. We're not considering the second order societal effects of gay surrogacy, of having men, let's just say, two men renting the womb of a third world woman or like a lower class woman, and literally doing the without the sex, the Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah, it is Handmaid's Tale, but that's not behind closed doors. The surrogacy is you're renting a womb, you're renting a woman's body, so that's not behind closed doors. I don't know what you do behind closed doors with consenting adults. I think that is your business. I think it just becomes other people's business when it's taken out into the public domain.
But can it stay? This is the spread of HIV through incredibly what's the word? Promiscuous gay males. Like, they were doing it in the bathhouse, maybe at truck stops. So it isn't technically behind closed doors, but it's consenting adults. But the second order effect of that is the amount of, like, even monkeypox is the recent thing. And then it pops up in children and dogs for some reason, but who knows why. But there are second order effects. And that's why that's why I give give a place for Chesterton's fence. There's a reason why these moralities were passed down to us. And we have to carefully reconsider homophobia, even as a term, because maybe there was something, maybe it was constrained for a reason. Maybe the laws and the persecution are not just distasteful, but morally wrong, and we're not suited to, we're not proper, perhaps. I mean, I'm willing to say that it's not good to prosecute people, but you can't just say that there's not second order effects for consenting adults being promiscuous or consenting or sexuality escaping the confines of the natural. And that this is another trigger word, I know. To say that it's natural for a man and a woman to have sex, but it's unnatural for two men to have sex. Maybe some people have that moral intuition. Maybe other people don't. But that goes back to what you're saying about the argument upstream of transgenderism, is that you're pinning a lot on this idea of the natural. And is that natural constrained? How constrained is it? How broad is it?
Was I pinning it on natural, though, or just it's not true?
Not true.
Like, my problem, it's again back to, like, I don't know if I said this, I think you might be putting words in my mouth, but I don't think I said I'm opposed to it because it's unnatural. I'm opposed to it because it's not true. Like, you're not changing a person's sex. But I'm assuming you're making an argument just against casual sex, not against homosexuality. You're just against casual sex, and you want to go back to more traditional values?
Well, it can sound like I'm saying I'm against it. I'm posing or asking, is there not second order effects to our behavior even behind closed doors?
Okay, well, I obviously there is, but I don't know that we want to go into a place where we are, well, the government has no place in your bedroom. I don't know that we want to be telling people what they can and cannot do behind closed doors, because how do you even do that? How do you police that? How do you manage that?
Yeah. Well, how do you police what people do to their bodies with regard to body modification?
Well, it's simple. That's where medical ethics comes in, because it's not behind closed doors. When it's out in the public, when it's a case of gender medicine or plastic surgery, the person, he's not inverting his own penis. The girls are not chopping off their own breasts. Somebody who has studied medicine is using their hard-won skills to do this to a person. And that medical professional should be guided by the Hippocratic Oath to first do no harm. It's not about the person's choice, like your bodily autonomy. You can do whatever you want in the bedroom. You can do whatever you want to your body. It's not that. It's the medical world needs to be guided by ethical principles. Otherwise, we end up in a dangerous place. We end up where we are now. We end up with colon vaginas and eunuch affirming care and customized mastectomy scars.
But I wonder if not all the arguments for that are derived from bodily autonomy. Your property is yours to do with what you wish.
Oh, it's definitely
you owe nothing to society.
Oh, it's definitely the guiding principle in gender medicine is autonomy. So yes, of course, it is derived from autonomy, but that's the shift that we need. That's the solution, as far as I'm concerned, to this whole mess, is doctors remembering the Hippocratic Oath, doctors remembering what their profession exists for. There's your solution. As for what people do in the bedroom, that's more complicated. That becomes, I don't know that we're going back. I don't know that I want to go back. I do think, I love Louise Perry's Case Against Sexual Revolution. That was an amazing book in that I never really understood how devastating the sexual revolution was for women. I always kind of looked at it as a good thing. And then she made a very strong case that casual sex is terrible for women. And it's also not great for men either. So I do...
No.
No.
And downstream, yeah.
Exactly. So I understand what you're saying. I don't know how you would return to traditional values.
Well, and that's where the conversation kind of naturally goes, because then you start thinking about the sexual revolution. You start thinking about alternative sexualities. How do you constrain it? How do you know what is allowed, what's not allowed? It seems like consenting adult is proper, but then what about medical ethics? You're like, well, there's no ethics in the bedroom, but there is ethics in the surgeon's room. Which there's a tension there. So how do we know where the ethics are? And I'm not proposing, I'm just questioning. Then you also get into the abortion, the downstream effects of abortion, the downstream effects of saying this is not a human being. This is just a clump of cells. Sex is just a biological act. I did it. The child is, or the zygote. We can't say child. We have to start messing around with language, and we start to having this really interesting ethical gray area where are there consequences to your actions? Is having them like just bunch of different sex and wanting to continue to do that without any of the natural consequences. And you didn't say natural, but that's still the truthful consequences of sex is children. When we start to have the medical, is there ethics there? Like, where are the ethics in stopping life from forming, and to what degree? And then you have, was it Britain that just like went hog wild with abortion up to the moment of birth law or something like that? So that's where this leads, this bodily autonomy stuff.
I mean, abortion is, I can tell you I've gone through many radical changes in my thinking over the last decade or so. And abortion, I never really thought deeply about it. I just was pro-choice. That's it, a woman's right to choose. And I can tell you the very day that changed for me, I'm not anti-abortion, but my opinion on abortion changed at my 12-week ultrasound with my first child, because they're doing the ultrasound. I'm like, oh my God, there's a little human being in there. It's got arms and legs and a head. And I remember thinking on the way home, that just like vacuuming that out, like that's a human being that I love more than anything else in the world, and I haven't even held it yet. And my whole thinking about abortion changed. It's an ethical dilemma that I don't think I've ever really settled one way or the other, because I still do believe that abortion should be available. Mm-hmm. I just think we can't trivialize it. It's an enormous decision, and and I think it doesn't do a woman any good to say, oh, it's not a big deal, abortion whenever you want. Like, just like there are consequences downstream to that need to be considered. But I've never understood late stage abortion. I don't understand it. Isn't that just giving birth? How can you you deliver a child? It's alive. That's not an abortion. That's just giving birth. Mm-hmm. So something is off about that argument of, oh, they'll abort at 30 weeks, 35 weeks. You can't abort. You're giving birth to a live child. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, and then shortly thereafter extinguishing it. It's just, it's the same ethics.
Are they though? They're not murdering babies after they've been delivered. That doesn't make any sense to me. How could that be a thing?
I just saw floating around that stories or video of a doctor like drowning a baby that was supposed to be aborted. They botched the abortion and then just killed the child. And that's kind of if you get into the literature on that stuff, that it's pretty devastating. It's probably not links that you want to click, but there are incidences of that happening, because widespread, if you look at the numbers of the amount of abortion that happens, I mean, there's a meme that floats around like where somebody counted up all the murders and all the wars in history, and the number of dead bodies is dwarfed by the number of abortions in the last 60 years since that technology became accessed. It's just, this is where it's the same ethical quandary: bodily autonomy, medical ethics, and what we use these tools for, and how you put those tools back in the shed once they come out. That's kind of iatrogenic harm in its own way. Once we have access to it, then there's this whole domain of ethics that would have never really existed in pre-medical history. I know you have your midwives with your different teas and different ways of dealing with that beforehand. And
yeah, as I said, I haven't landed anywhere, and I don't know that anyone really can. At what point? I couldn't even put a week on it. I looked at my 12-week-old little baby inside me, and my thoughts on abortion changed instantly. Mm-hmm. But where do you put? I just don't know at what point I could even say, okay, it's okay then, but it's not okay after that. I've thought about it, but I've never landed somewhere, and that's why it's a dilemma for me. Whereas with gender, it's not. Because there's no gray area for me on the trans issue. It's actually, none of it is real, none of it is true, and none of it is medicine. And that's don't have the same internal confusion.
Why?
Well, because you can draw a line. To me, I can draw a line very easily. There are things that I know to be true because I've thought about it for so long. So, one, you cannot change a person's sex. Two, inverting penises and creating arm flesh appendages is not going to make a person's life better. Health is valuable, and you're destroying a person's health in a very profound, drastic way, and that cannot be called medicine. And also, I haven't even gone into the whole social contagion, cultural craze, the fact that we're medicalizing adolescents caught up in a cultural craze and selling them snake oil and telling them that this is going to make their life amazing and wonderful. I know, I don't even have to think about it. I know that that's wrong. I know we're selling them a lie, and I know that it's wrong. So I don't have the internal confusion, and I'm, impossible to draw the line, what's right, what's wrong. To me, it's all very clear cut on the trans issue, whereas abortion gets very murky.
Because you can say maybe someone's life is going to be worse, the child or the mother, if this baby is born, at least socioeconomically.
Yeah, it's, first of all, at what point? I used to think, abortion before, I don't even think I really thought about it in the past, but like abortion at 12 weeks, oh yeah, no big deal. It's just a clump of cells. And then I saw my 12-week-old baby and I'm like, oh my God, it's like a little tiny human being. So that brought in the confusion. And from that point on, I've never had a clear, oh yeah, no big deal. I think I came to the conclusion that it's always a big deal. It's just always a big deal. But at what point does it become unacceptable? That I just don't have. I struggle to land on a precise line. Whereas with gender, it's very easy for me to make statements that I am completely sure about because I've thought deeply about it. And it's just much easier if you come at it from a place of reality and ethics.
One way, well, I mean, it's difficult to do, but one vector of arguing against elective gender reassignment or sex change surgery is to inject back into the culture an ethos that this is a big deal. Your body is important. Your sex is important. Now, what do we do with that? We're just saying it is important. But then we ask, then it's like, well, how is it important? That's another conversation. But getting it back to, this is important. Your growing body is really important. I had a beautiful conversation with another Gen Spect speaker, Mariah Burton Nelson, yesterday. And she's on the sports aspect, the Protect Women's sports aspect of this topic. And we talked thoroughly about this thing called cornhole. Because she's older, she loves sports. Cornhole is the one thing that she can do right now that she can be really competitive in. It's where you throw a beanbag across the room, try to get into a hole, right? Yeah. But we talked about the impact that athleticism has on one's self and one's interaction with society. There's a social aspect to the athlete. And then there's this internal aspect and this embracing of one's body, and even understanding that my body has limits, my body has pains, my body is failing in these different ways. And through athleticism, coming to love and cherish and embody one's body and wed one's body with one's mind or soul or whatever, and then also be a part of competition, part of the team, and celebrating the body as a natural, beautiful thing. That's another way of recentering the conversation, grounding the conversation in a positive human value, I think we could say.
Yeah, and you can take all of that and apply it to intimacy. You can take all of that and apply it to a person's sexual identity. And that's what these young kids they don't have that experience yet. Even if they are adolescents, they have limited to no sexual experience. They have no long-term intimate relationships, and they have no understanding of the importance of it. And they're giving that up. And I know it might seem harsh, but when you alter your body in drastic ways, you are limiting your dating pool very, very severely. And you won't understand the importance of that as an adolescent. Mm-hmm. But mm-hmm. we as adults should understand the importance of that. And therefore, we should understand the importance of protecting it on behalf of these young people.
I don't see how you stop. Once you start to reintroduce value and importance, you have to start to, you get closer and closer to a conservative point of view. By example, in these gender conversations, especially around adolescents forestalling their sexual maturation through chemical and then surgical means, they don't have the ability to have an orgasm. That's stated. You're robbing a child of an orgasm. Well, who cares about an orgasm? It's just dopamine in the head, right? Like, well, is it though? Is sharing an orgasm with someone else, is that a core to human experience? And you're like, well, there's actually more value here. There's spiritual values here, not just there's psychological values here. There's not just, it's more than just a biological function. And somehow this transgenderism thing got smuggled in by all these different vectors, but it's a loss of valuing the body. Valuing sex is something more than just instant gratification. So it brings out all these other consecutive values that have been brewing over centuries, that have been encoded in religions and other philosophical systems that us moderns have kind of stepped away from in order to liberate ourselves from all the things of having to get married or whatever it is, but it's interesting. Once you start to apply value here, you start grasping towards why these values are. And the ancients have been wrestling with these things for much longer than we have.
We have a hard time talking about sex, though. It's just difficult for people to really, we're too prudish, I suppose, to talk about the importance of being able to orgasm, for example. And then if you start talking about it in the context of adolescence, it gets even more difficult, I think. But I think we should all be able to understand the importance of having a fulfilling, intimate sexual relationship. And therefore, how could anyone possibly say, oh, it's just a biological response, it's no big deal to take away. We've lost something. We've lost our humanity if we've lost our understanding of the importance of intimacy in that way.
Oh, the humanities. What's coming up with you? I guess we're going to be in Albuquerque at the end of September. What do you got down in the pipe or coming down the pike? And what can you actually talk about? Because I know you're involved in all of these kind of conspiratorial bowers of your own. So what's on the radar for Mia Hughes?
Oh, what can I talk about? So yeah, I have all kinds of, I love that I find myself in meetings and I'll throw out a comment and then all of a sudden I'm off on some crazy tangent and I'm writing stuff that I can't even talk about. So I'm doing lots of that.
Wow. I'm
with the Macdonald Laurier Institute here in Canada.
What is that?
It's a think tank here in Ottawa. I started with them in January. So we're in a strange place in Canada, just a really...
You think?
Well, I mean, I think maybe even stranger than at any other point. I don't want to go off too long on the election, but we just had the stupidest election in the history of democracy. In that,
that's saying something.
I think we did. I really do. We had a solid. The polls were showing a solid Pierre Poilievre conservative majority, And then Trudeau resigned, and I knew that Trudeau resigning would impact Poilievre's popularity because a lot of it was hatred of Trudeau, not Poilievre, love of Poilievre. But then I spent a week in Florida with Peter Boghossian in February. And so I got on the plane to fly down there, and Canada was as normal as it can possibly be in this day and age. And then I flew back to a nation that had lost its mind. This mass hysteria had swept the entire nation. Trump derangement syndrome, fueled by the mainstream media, and it was the Liberal government thought that they could tie Poilievre to Trump, just like make out that Poilievre was like Trump. So then they fueled Trump derangement syndrome. The entire nation lost its mind, and we ended up with a Liberal government for another 4 years. That's basically what happened. And
I love that resurgence of Canadian baby boomer patriotism out of nowhere. Like they were like, yeah, give all of our country away to immigrants. Well, no, Trump's coming for us. We got to believe in Canada now.
It shows how shallow
they shat all over those truckers.
Well, here's what's happened. I've been here since 2010. When I first arrived, there's Canada Day is July 1st, and one of my children was born on Canada Day. So we typically go downtown. We have the snowbirds, and there's a big celebration and everything. So July 1st, I would go downtown. In the early days, I found Canadian patriotism to be embarrassing. I felt embarrassed witnessing it because I didn't really understand it. Everybody's like, yay, Canada, and draped in flags. And I found it embarrassing. And then Trudeau comes along, and Trudeau turns us into this shameful, genocidal nation. So around 2017, 2018, you start to be ashamed to be Canadian because of what we did to the Indigenous population. And then it goes into overdrive when they find the unmarked graves. Supposedly 215 children were buried at this residential school, just a bunch of rocks. They've never found a single body. Flags are at half-mast. Everyone's wearing orange shirts, and everybody's just angry and depressed and miserable on Canada Day. And then the trucker convoy happens, and they're waving Canadian flags. And so the Canadian flag then becomes a symbol of the far right. And so then we're a genocidal nation, and the Canadian flag is a symbol of the far right, Nazis, whatever. And then Trump derangement syndrome, you're right. They stoke this Trump derangement syndrome, and now everyone is draping themselves in Canadian flags once again. But it's in defiance of, Trump, and they're showing like we're proud to be Canadian. It just shows how shallow, how easily manipulated the Canadian population is. And it's not just Canada. All nations are so easily manipulated in the age of social media, but it just shows how shallow their beliefs are. And they'll just adopt any fashionable belief system if it's exactly if it suits their side, their tribe. So but
the same
where was
thing's
I going?
happening in your home country of Britain. The patriotic self-determinism and love of country and love of the indigenous Britons is kind of being castigated as far right now. But all the British colonies, Australia, Canada, and the UK itself are all experiencing this massive crisis of identity, and they don't know who they are, and they're being swamped by globalism. And it's like there's all this grappling for identity, and the younger people just don't really have an identity, and they're trying to get it back. And every time they try to grasp onto something, the media says, well, that's far right. That's far right. That's far right. Don't stand up for yourself. That's far right. We'll take care of these rape gangs. Don't worry about them. Mistakes were made, but any sort of Anglophilia is wrong and awful and cringe, I guess, maybe.
I find, to me, I think I found Canadian, I was embarrassed by the open, very obvious patriotism on Canada Day, because as a Brit, we were never that patriotic. It wasn't that we weren't ashamed. I wouldn't say as a nation we were ashamed of our history, but we just weren't openly patriotic in the way that these Canadians were when I first arrived in Canada around 2010. But I find I was wrong to be embarrassed by that, and I find myself craving it. I look for signs that it's coming back. And you know what? If people are draping themselves in Canadian flags to be in defiance of Trump and his tariffs, so be it. If that's what you want to do, in the hope that it will once again morph into an actual love of Canada, because it is a wonderful country. If you can get rid of all the stupidity and the politics and everything, it's an amazing country to live in. And I think it could go back to being what it was when I immigrated here. I hold out hope that it can. So sure, drape yourself in a flag for whatever reason. And hopefully at some point, everybody just once again realizes that it's okay to be proud to be Canadian.
It's okay to be proud to be Canadian. Far-right dog whistle right there. Are you Canadian? Do you consider yourself partially Canadian yet?
I was just talking, who was I talking about this with? Just the other day I was talking about this, that I just think of myself, I can't help it. I think of myself as a Brit living in Canada.
Are you cosmopolitan, or is your British identity? Do you have more of a stake in that, I suppose?
It's just, I'm so obviously, I have a Canadian passport. I'm raising my children here. I plan to stay here forever. It's just, I stand out. I so obviously was not born here. And as soon as I meet people and I open my mouth, people say, oh, where are you from? And so I don't feel Canadian. I'm so obviously not Canadian, but I do have a passport. I wonder if I should start calling myself Canadian. I don't know.
Well, do you have, is your identity as a Brit thickening a little bit?
Thickening?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Kind of proud? Do you want to save, your country from globalism? Do you have more stake in it than you did when it was just kind of something you didn't even think about?
Oh, I don't think consciously. I don't think consciously. I just don't think I've thrown off my Britishness. I think it's obvious in all of my interactions here that I'm a Brit. Not just the accent, but it's just obvious. And so I haven't thrown off. Could you pick up that teacup one more time? Because I love it when you bring your tea. It's just so nice. It feels like we're playing Tea Party whenever I'm talking to you. It's just like this. Look at I got this in Nova Scotia, this cute little teapot. Oh. Isn't that adorable?
That's great.
Yeah, I love it.
Oh, well, I'm looking forward to hanging out with you in Albuquerque. Links, likewise. If anybody has time to get the tickets, they're still selling them, but the date's closing, I'm pretty sure. So anybody listening that is interested in meeting all these wonderful people I've been interviewing about it, get those tickets.
There's something very special about the conferences, isn't there? Like, we all know each other online. We're all doing interviews or just interacting on Twitter, but there's something very precious about the real in-person interactions, having drinks with people, having meals, and just conversations in the bathroom. I love the conferences.
There's something phenomenal. So there's these different groups around this topic, around trying to enlighten the world about what's actually going on with the gender topic. And there's a lot of different groups, and some of them are more medical and some of them are more political. And Stella, who's the founder of GenSpec, there's a few other people who are founders of GenSpec, but she's kind of the mother bear, if I may use a gendered term. She's created something where a lot of different voices with a lot of different interests can connect, and it doesn't prioritize any given one thing. And in talking with all the different people that are going to be speaking here, got people from all over the map with what they care about and their political priors. And so it's one of those, if I may use a term that I'm constantly mocking online, it's a classical liberal kind of think tank.
She's created something truly remarkable. That's the absolute beauty of it. People all across the political spectrum with all kinds of views, everyone comes together because they've got something to say about this particular mad moment in history. And the people who attend to listen, they're interested in the way forward. And I love, to me, of course, I love that it's following WPATH. I think this is, to me, it's my favorite of all of Stella's ideas. She comes up with so many. It's amazing, right? It's just so good. And she's come up with so many amazing ideas, but this is my favorite of all of hers, is that she follows them around. And it's, as someone who's spent years studying medical scandals, these conferences are going down in history. They're going to, when they write the history books of this scandal, the parallel conferences will be a great point for historians and people wanting to understand it, to see where were they? Where were the two opposing sides in 2025? Or look at what WPATH was talking about. God only knows what they're going to be talking about, disfiguring genitals and eunuchs. And then there's the GenSpec conference, and people trying to understand the moment, but also at this point, we're trying to lead the way out of it. It's not about opposing WPATH, I think, so much anymore.
It's not an ankle biter kind of vibe.
Yeah, they're done. They are done. It's just like, it's only a matter of time before everyone sees them for who they are. So now it's, okay, how do we get out of this mess? What are the practical ways to get out of it? And that's the beauty of the conferences and the just meeting people in person. It's a wonderful thing.
So I always like to mine our conversations for those little shorts, those little clips. And I guess it's kind of awkward to throw the question at you at the very end, but over the past year since we spoke, I don't know, maybe half a year, is there like an awesome mad scientist medical scandal that is just, that shocked you even at this late stage of callousness?
Oh, I mean, the last one,
I like the ball transplant. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, let me think. The last one, I haven't gone so much into history recently. I've been more in the present day and trying to figure out the last one that I came across that just surprised me was this 1920s craze for treating. It was just, they were treating children with who had like skin disorders, minor as well, like ringworm or some kind of fungus infection. And they were treating them with a toxic metal that is actually poisonous. And they had this medical craze. I think it was thallium, the chemical, the metal. Mm-hmm. And they were treating these kids, and a bunch of people were saying, not sure. I think this might be poisonous. I think this might be dangerous. And the medical world got swept up in the craze for applying this toxic metal onto children for very trivial skin disorders. And then a bunch of them die. And then they realize, oh, maybe it wasn't such a good idea after all. And the reason that I just think it's fascinating is doctors are human, and they get swept up in, they're susceptible to crazes in the same way that the rest of us are. And these doctors, the warning signs were there. It was a toxic metal. And yet they got swept up in the craze of it because it was really effective. If it didn't kill the child, it was really effective. And they got swept up. And there's your lesson, is the medical world. Doctors are just human. They're fallible. They make mistakes. They're subject to the cultural crazes and fads in the same way that we all are. And we always need to keep that in mind when we're looking at the ethics of medicine.
And that burning desire to save the children. It speaks a lot to, I mean, there's the good impulse to it, but like that, the blind side that seems like to repeatedly occur. We're trying to save the children, and oops.
They love, it's an effective cure, and we want to cure this illness. We're doctors, we're in the business of curing people, so let's just, like, this is working, let's do it. And everybody gets swept up in it without just ignoring the red flags. The red flags were obvious in this craze in the 1920s, but the red flags were obvious in gender medicine too. It was always obvious that blocking puberty was a bad idea. It was always obvious that adolescents couldn't understand fertility loss. It was always obviously a bad idea to medicalize an adolescent identity. The red flags have been there all along, but getting swept up in the craze, they got swept up in the cultural moment and ignored them all. And here we are.
Yeah, we're a culture of flags, and some flags tend to obscure red flags.
There you go. Those rainbow ones.
Yep. They're dazzling.
They're
amazing. Mia Hughes, so apparently you got a podcast now. What is it? Where can people find it? What's it about?
That's right. It's called Beyond Gender.
Beyond Gender.
Right. It's the idea for it is, well, there's two meanings to Beyond Gender. First of all, we're envisioning a world where we are beyond this gender madness. And to get there, you have to talk beyond gender. You have to be willing to go and look what's going on in the culture around this insanity. What cultural climate created it? So we're not restricted to only talking about gender. To be honest, as anyone who knows me in my life will tell you, that if you're having a conversation with me, it's probably going to end up being about gender. But that, I think, is the beauty of the podcast, is we can invite all kinds of people on. They can bring their knowledge that is not gender specific, and then Stella and I can bring in how that ties into gender and how it's influenced where we are now. So I love our podcast. It's small. We only started in March, I think, but yeah, it's great. I highly recommend it.
And you do a lot of writing in professional ways, but do you have a place where it's all stockpiled? Do you have an archive, a Mia Hughes archive?
I have a page on MacDonald Laurier. I have Crimea River, the Substack, and I've never put anything on there. I still...
But at least you got the domain.
I took it. There you go. I didn't want someone else to take it, but I still have yet to do that. I do have plans for a book, and I've had this plan for a long time, but it seems more realistic now, so... I've gone through 4 or 5 different possibilities for what I want the book to actually be, but I think I may have landed on it. So, but MacDonald Laurier, all of my Canadian writing is put on my page on the MacDonald Laurier Institute website.
Cool. Well, I'll link to all your work down there in the description. Mia Hughes, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time and joining me today.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
There we go. And